Right, it's now being recorded. So good evening everyone, and thank you for attending this talk tonight. My name is Michael Moynard and I've been part of the Ryder-Cheshire Australia story since 2011. And I'm also a member of the Banyule Network of Uniting Churches, Rosanna Congregation, and I hope you will see the connection between those two as we go through this presentation. Firstly, I would like to thank the organisers of the McKinney lecture for inviting me to be the guest lecturer for 2025. Mel, thank you very much. This is a great honour, and I recall many McKinney lectures from the past and lecturers who I've been acquainted with, and I consider them as great teachers, academics, ministers and others. So my small contribution hardly rates a mention against these giants, but here I am. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge those people who've been influential in my support of Ryder-Cheshire Australia and its support for 2 overseas homes. Some are here tonight, others aren't, but Peter Newton, AO, introduced me to Timor-Leste and Cleaver Domin, and Anthea Swan, who is here tonight, OAM, helped me understand the strength of the Ryder-Cheshire Australia organisation. However, the most significant person in my journey with Ryder-Cheshire Australia was Dr. Don Sinclair, OAM, ex-president of the Ryder-Cheshire Australia, chair of the Ryder-Cheshire Victorian Homes Foundation in Ivanhoe, and just a superb, wonderful person. But more of these people later. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about 4 things. First, who were the founders of Ryder-Cheshire? What are the Ryder-Cheshire programs? What's been my involvement personally in this story? And what's the future looking like for our organisation? Our founders. In the beginning, there were 2 people who lived through the trauma of the Second World War in Europe and who decided independently to provide support for the relief of suffering in the world. Lord Leonard Cheshire of Woodall, VC, DSO, 1917 to 1992, and his wife, Baroness Lady Sue Ryder of Warsaw, CMG, OBE, 1923 or 24 to 2000. They were brave, resilient people who overcame the ravages of war to become angels of mercy in a difficult post-war world. Leonard Cheshire was born in 1917, the son of an Oxford lawyer. His education was at Stowe and Oxford. In 1939, he joined the Royal Air Force. He was posted to Bomber Command and spent the war in this area. He was the most decorated British airman of the war. He was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross after 100 missions, when the average mission for someone in Bomber Command was 25. He was awarded, in 1944, he was awarded the Victoria Cross for his command of the famous Dam Busters program. He was chosen as a UK observer to the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki in 1945, and this changed him forever. He decided there and then to provide support for those less fortunate than himself. He contracted TB in 1946 and spent 18 months in hospital and rehabilitation. He knew firsthand the ravages of TB and it is opportune that both Ryder-Cheshire Australia homes that we support have strong TB detection and treatment programs. In 1948, he gave up his residence to support and assist veterans of the war. He set up foundations around the world to provide relief for people of any race, religion, gender, and who were suffering from illness or disability. He used his name to establish foundations, but always asked them to be self-sufficient in staffing and funding. Sue Ryder was born in 1923 or 1924 in Leeds. It has been said that she put her date of birth back a year so that she could join the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, or FANY, in 1939. From there, she moved to the Special Operations Executive, from which she began her career behind the lines in Europe. She worked in undercover operations in Poland during the war and delivered lifelines for Polish refugees to come to England during the 40s and 50s. She established the famous Sue Ryder op shops, and this is one in Cavendish, which is in the town in which the Leonard and Sue lived. And these were commenced in the 1950s, and this photo was taken in 2018, so they're still going. She too sought to provide comfort and assistance to people in need through her foundations. Leonard and Sue met in 1955 and came to realise they had very similar interests. They married in 1959 in Bombay, or now Mumbai, India. They had 2 children, Jeremy, born in 1960, and Elizabeth, born in 1962. Unfortunately, Jeremy has passed away, but Elizabeth is still well and truly with us. And we had the privilege, my wife and I, of meeting Elizabeth in London in 2018. And this is a photo of her. She's been a wonderful supporter of Ryder-Cheshire Australia and has supported the legacy of her parents. In 1959, Leonard and Sue established the first Ryder-Cheshire Foundation venture, a home in Dehradun in India for the children of lepers and for children with disabilities. They named it Raphael, or the meaning of the Archangel of Healing. The early years of Raphael were tough, but donations flowed in and came in as they were needed, a providence that Leonard and Sue saw in all their work. They sought international support for Raphael in the 1960s, and during a visit to Australia in 1964, Leonard and Sue recruited the first Australian supporters of Raphael, and from there the Ryder-Cheshire Foundations were formed. Originally by state rather than federally, but as you'll see, we are now a federal body. And the Victorian Foundation was established in 1964 and is still operating today. Leonard and Sue travelled the world in support of their foundations. They travelled to Australia on many occasions, and there are several members of our Ryder-Cheshire family in Australia that met them and knew them well. In fact, I think we have some people here in the audience who did meet Leonard and Sue. They had an abiding love of Raphael and its children. In fact, Leonard's last visit outside of England was to Raphael just months before he died in 1992. The question I ask in this foundation is, why were Leonard and Sue so successful in their programs to develop homes for people with disabilities? I think they both had a doggedness and a stubbornness which did not allow obstacles to distract them. India's Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, said that Cheshire was the greatest man he had met since Gandhi. One of his gifts was to be able to obtain finance and support from establishment figures. He always said that finance was not the issue. It was finding the right people with passion, skills, and empathy for the needy of this world. When they commenced a program to establish a home, the finance came along. His stature as a war hero opened doors to him, and he would often stay in Government House on his trips to Australia. And yet, he could just as easily stay with a friend like Don Sinclair in suburban McLeod. They were successful because they were determined, resolute, and persistent. And they were empathetic to the needs of people who were suffering in the world, and they had an overwhelming passion to help people in need. They lived in a place called Cavendish House, which is still in place. Here it is, a photo from it from a few years ago. And it's in a small town of the same name, Cavendish, near Sudbury in Suffolk. And they occupied a small flat at the top of the building. And they've been buried together in the village burial ground in Cavendish. St Mary's Church of England in Cavendish is next to the burial ground. This church dates back to the 1300s and it stands next to the graveyard. I mention this because it has a memorial plaque for Leonard and Sue on one of its walls, even though they were not Anglican, but they were Roman Catholic. After the support garnered for Raphael, especially in Ballarat, which still has a strong Ryder-Cheshire supporter group, Ryder-Cheshire Australia's next venture was in Ivanhoe. There had been a suggestion made to Ryder-Cheshire Australia that they open a home in Morwell. But this was found not to have a sufficient business case, but it did indicate that there was an issue with respect to the costs of regional patients and their carers coming to Melbourne for patient care. To cater for this need, the Ryder-Cheshire Victorian Homes Foundation was established in 1981. There's a news photo of the time which shows Leonard Cheshire, who was here for the opening, Bill Galbraith, who was then the chair of the new foundation, Bruce Skeggs, the MLA for Ivanhoe, some people might remember Mr Skeggs, and our own Hector Davis, the Mayor of Heidelberg. And they were photographed at the opening. A building was rented from the RSL War Widows Trust to provide support for regional families of patients who were requiring medical care at the repatriation hospitals in Heidelberg. The facility now has 3 buildings, providing 43 rooms in support of regional families looking for accommodation while caring for patients in hospitals in Melbourne, and not only in the Repat, but the Austin, Peter Mac and other hospitals in Melbourne. This is where Don Sinclair comes in. Don was a mentor to me and to so many others in our organisation, but he was also intimately involved in Ryder-Cheshire Australia and the Victorian Homes. Don was the president of Ryder-Cheshire Australia in the 2000s and was the chair of the Ryder-Cheshire Victorian Homes Committee from 1991 to 2016. He successfully led the Victorian Homes through the construction of a new building in 1992, the refurbishment of the buildings in the early 2000s, and the addition of lifts in the buildings in 2014. And in the audience, actually, we have someone from the committee, Peter, who is also a member of that committee and lived through all of those interesting times. During Don's time, the administration of the home was provided by a Brigidine sister, Sister Jane Gorey, OAM. Sister Jane retired in 2019 after 20 years of service to the homes in 2 stints. But since then, the homes have hired professional assistants for the running of the homes, and it provides support for 2,000 to 3,000 carers and patients each year. Don's achievements with the Victorian homes was recognised in 2022 when one of the buildings was named in his honour. And as you drive past Donaldson Street, you will see Don Sinclair House there on one of our buildings. Around this time, in the early 2000s, Ryder-Cheshire, Australia also opened a home in Mount Gambier for people with disabilities. That was opened in 2006 and it was expanded in 2018. We also owned a house in Singleton in New South Wales, which provided shelter for needy people in that city. Timor-Leste and Cleveland. The establishment of the Ryder-Cheshire program in Timor-Leste was very different. Timor-Leste has had a checkered history for the past 400 years. It was a colony of Portugal from the 16th century until 1975. With the Portuguese Empire collapsing, Indonesia took the opportunity of invading the colony and annexing it. Support for the nascent independence movement in Timor-Leste was slow in coming, with the major players in the region, including Australia, siding with Indonesia. And the annexation was murderous. In Timor-Leste, it's estimated that around 240,000 Timorese people were killed during that period. The most well-known of the concerns was the Santa Cruz massacre of 1991, and that was part of the violence that beset the country. The Balibo incident in 1975, where Australian news reporters were killed in the invasion, was a thorn in the relationship with Indonesia and Australia at the time, but it was subsumed by broader geopolitical interests. But to its credit, the Australian government finally supported a UN-backed referendum on the future of Timor-Leste, and that was held in 1999. The people voted overwhelmingly for independence. Following the intervention of the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, or Interfet, which was ably led by Australia, and then by a short administration by the United Nations, Timor-Leste became an independent nation in May 2002. Timor-Leste is one of the youngest countries in the world, but it's also one of the poorest. Its population at the 2022 census was 1.34 million, with its demographics skewed towards the young. It is overwhelmingly Roman Catholic, although the spirit of that can also be mixed with some earlier beliefs, especially in the countryside. The economy is dependent on a small export base, notably gas, and government spending, which is based on taxes and a national sovereign fund, which is rapidly running down. 40% of the population is below the poverty line, especially in the countryside where most of the economy is subsistence. Consequently, there is considerable funding from other countries and particularly NGOs in supporting local communities. This is a photo of Peter, for those who may not have met him before, but it's a photo with our former Deputy Prime Minister Tim Fischer in 2018, taken here in Ivanhoe. Tim Fischer was again a tremendous supporter of Ryder-Cheshire, and he came to our biennial conference and was our guest speaker. And he was also my minister when I was in government. Peter Newton has been the driving force behind the establishment of Cleaver-Domin, which means sharing with love in Tetum, the language of Timor-Leste. The story began in 2000, just after the referendum that gave Timor-Leste its opportunity for independence. Cleaver-Domin is in a suburb called Tibar, about 15 minutes by car from Dili, the capital of Timor-Leste. The site had been an Indonesian military hospital and was provided to Ryder-Cheshire, Australia, to house a new health centre. It first provided support to patients from Dili Hospital who were not well enough to return to their villages after treatment. Volunteers from Ryder-Cheshire provided the administration of the home until 2004, when local Timorese took on that role. Volunteers from Ryder-Cheshire still support the home through short-term placements. And again, in the room we have a number of people who have been volunteers at Timor-Leste and Cleaver-Domin. So through Peter's efforts, donations and volunteers have come to Cleaver-Domin. His fundraising efforts in Victoria are legion, including two major events involving later Governor-General Cosgrove in 2000 and 2001. These and further donations have maintained Cleaver-Domin's operational needs. It has expanded its role in recent years. It's been able to obtain grants for TB testing and treatment, which has provided for TB detection equipment and staff. Ryder-Cheshire, Australia has helped that through obtaining an automatic TB detection machine through a grant from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in 2019. Donations from Ryder-Cheshire, Australia have built cottages on the T-Bar site to house inpatients. However, in recent times, the flow of donations has not matched the requirements of Cleaver-Domin, and there has been a need to reduce Cleaver-Domin's funding. More funding is needed to provide a sustainable base for Cleaver-Domin into the future. Cleaver-Domin now runs several health programs. One of the major scourges in Timor-Leste is TB, as we've mentioned. It is the highest level of TB incidence in Southeast Asia. A number of NGOs fund TB programs in Timor-Leste, including the Global Fund, which has provided funding for Cleaver-Domin's TB detection and rehabilitation programs, where it has actually been at the front of the forefront of the practical programs of detection and support for patients. The need for these programs is particularly important in the villages. Cleaver-Domin relies on support from Ryder-Cheshire, Australia, the Timor-Leste government, the Global Fund for TB relief, and groups such as Rotary in Australia. A dental clinic has been established in conjunction with Malik Timor, an NGO with funding from Australia, to provide dental support to school children and the local community. So what's been my involvement in all this? I knew something of Timor-Leste before I knew about Ryder-Cheshire's involvement in the country. In my role as a Southeast Asian representative for the Australian Trade Commission in the early 2000s, I was responsible for considering Australia's trade and investment opportunities with a newly created country. In July 2000, I travelled to Dili from Darwin to meet with officials from UNTAD, the body administering Timor-Leste after the 1999 referendum. I also met with Australian businesses in Dili, most of whom had set up operations behind Interfed. In 2000, several major Australian businesses had already set up operations there, including Telstra, the ANZ Bank and Harvey Norman. And this is a picture of the Harvey Norman shop in Timor-Leste in July 2000. There were also many small traders, consultants and construction workers in town. Some had come from Darwin or Perth to assist in the reconstruction of Dili following the referendum, when departing Indonesian troops had destroyed parts of the city. And so the destruction is shown here. When I was here in July 2000, there were a number of buildings that looked like this. It did need a lot of restoration. At the same time that I was there, Peter Newton was beginning the negotiations with the United Nations transition team for a building to house what would become the But I didn't meet Peter until the 2012 Ryder-Cheshire Australian Biennial Conference. But his role in steering the Kleeble Domain project through its early days was inspirational. He is still involved with the project even now, 25 years later. The achievements of Kleeble Domain has surely met the aspirations of the early work of the 2000s. It has run extensive TB programs in the countryside, has a program for children with disabilities, provides educational support for disadvantaged children, and runs a dental outpatient clinic. This work has been paid for, as I said, by Global Fund for TB, the Government of Timor-Leste, and from funds provided by supporters through Ryder-Cheshire Australia. My formal introduction to the Ryder-Cheshire organisation was through Don Sinclair. And this photo shows the two people who've been so involved in the last 20 years in building Ryder-Cheshire Australia's programs. Peter Newton is presenting Don with a Ryder-Cheshire Certificate of Appreciation in 2016. So Don had been an outstanding supporter of Ryder-Cheshire since the 1960s. He was a friend of Leonard and Sue, who often stayed with him in his home in McLeod on their visits to Melbourne. I met Don in 2009 when we joined the Uniting Church in Rosanna, following our move from Canberra to Melbourne. Don found, as he always did, that I had worked in India at the Australian High Commission, and he told me about the work of Raphael. It transpired that the High Commission had provided some funds to Raphael, but I actually had not been aware of it at the time. So when I returned to India in 2012, Don introduced me to the chair of Raphael and paved the way for a visit to the home in October of that year. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see the programs of Raphael in its school, its physio programs for children in remote villages, and its TB program. And I also, in my journey with Ryder-Cheshire Australia, I found that I actually had a family connection with Leonard Cheshire. Limited, but still there. My uncle had flown in Lancaster bombers in the RAF during the war. In conversation one day, he recalled that Leonard Cheshire would often brief the bomber crews before their sorties. And as my uncle said, he was as cool as a cucumber, even though he often flew in the most dangerous of positions during the raids. Don also invited me to join the committee of the Ryder-Cheshire Victorian Homes Foundation, which has 3 buildings in Ryder. I joined that committee in 2011, and I'm still on it today. Following that, I joined the Ryder-Cheshire Victorian Foundation in 2015 and have been a member of that body ever since. I became president of the Victorian Foundation in 2016, and with that I became a member of the board of Ryder-Cheshire Australia, and I'm still in both positions. Don was a wonderful person, quietly spoken, respectful, and a great raconteur. His passing in 2020 was a great loss to us all. The future. Ryder-Cheshire Australia reorganised its board in 2022 to more clearly reflect its obligations to the international homes and its member base in Australia. It has become financially sustainable and looks to continue to support Raphael and Cleber Domin into the future. It relies on its members of its community for donations and has had much support from schools, from Rotary and local churches, even though the organisation itself is non-denominational. However, in recent years, the needs of both homes have outstripped Ryder-Cheshire Australia's ability to fund. More donations are needed to provide the basic operational costs for Cleber Domin. The need for the work of Cleber Domin is growing, but the funds available are limited. The Timor-Leste government itself is under severe financial pressure. It needs new projects itself as a government to build a sustainable future for the country. Investment in infrastructure is urgently required, and new projects in natural resources and in tourism are needed to build the well-being of the country. And it relies heavily on aid funding from governments and NGOs. International aid funding, though, has been declining for several years. And while the effects of the current cutback in funding from the United States Agency for International Development remain to be seen, it can't be reassuring that a major donor like the United States is reducing its support. So I hope you can think of providing a donation to support our programs. Donations to RCA are tax deductible. RCA is a volunteer-run organisation, and so all its donations go to helping Raphael and Cleber Domin in a sustainable way. You can also become a member of the organisation, and through its website, rydercheshire.org, you can go and see what may be of interest to you in supporting our organisation. And we're able to accept donations here tonight. That's sunset over Dilly Beach, which is pretty lovely. Thank you for coming to tonight and listening to the story of Ryder-Cheshire Australia and the stories of Leonard Cheshire and Sue Ryder and others who have been associated and have built this wonderful organisation. I want to acknowledge several sources for this talk, including Cleber Domin, Sharing with Love by Peter Newton, A Safe Haven, book published by Ryder-Cheshire Homes, Ivanhoe, Raphael, 1959 to 2009, published in India in 2009, and two books on Sue Ryder. One, Sue Ryder, A Life Lived for Others by Joanna Bogle, 2022, and Lady Sue Ryder of Warsaw by Tessa West from 2018. And finally, Leonard Cheshire wrote several books, and one that I would recommend is Where is God in All of This? And it's a series of interviews with Leonard, published in 1991. So with that, I will like to leave you with another message from a great supporter of Cleber Domin, Father Ted Burns, who's a retired priest from St Joseph's Church in Elstonwick. And I now will have to change across to listen to his talk, but I think you'll enjoy that.
My name is Father Ted Burns. I'm a retired priest in the Archdiocese of Melbourne, and my hobby is something I'd like to tell you about, something that's interested me all my life. It's the Ryder-Cheshire Foundation. When our Lord gave us a charter, and this is what it's about. I was speaking to some of my friends recently who had just come back from a trip overseas, and they were very keen. They were talking about it as people do after they've had a trip. They planned all their lives for this. They called it their end of work holiday. And it gave me the chance to tell them that there's another big holiday coming and we've got to prepare for that too. You go to communion, we say our prayers, that's your personal life with God. The other part is to love your neighbour as you love yourself. That's a lot more than just being nice to the people next door in the club and up the street, the petrol station and all that. We have got to do something as people who live in a very good country, the best country in the world. And we're able to, if we can, help people in a very significant way by listening to that second commandment of our Lord's, love your neighbour. Who's your neighbour? Well, your neighbour's someone in need. When you're selecting a place that you reckon is worth your money, and you know what that means, we are pretty sensitive and pretty, let me say, I suppose suspicious. When we hear of big causes getting huge donations and they're spending it somewhere or other and we don't know much about it, well, there are some that aren't like that. I'll give you one where the money you give goes right where you want it to give, and you'll see evidence of that. Well, the one I'm telling you about now, Cleber in East Timor, there's no scepticism needed there. I've seen this working, or every dollar goes where it's supposed to go. People are helped in a way you can't believe. Unless you've been to East Timor, you've got no idea of the need that there is there to help people. Every one of us has a chance to do this sort of work, not necessarily by going there, but by supporting those who are there. You'll soon see some interesting, well, in fact, you'll see the whole picture of Cleber, and you'll see how very thoroughly the operation is. You'll be sort of conducted around. It's a lovely set, and most of the buildings there are ones that we put up, or you, people like you, put up. You'll see more about it later, and I hope you come to believe in it as much as I do, because I think we feel better when we do something really useful and good for somebody else. You do. It's just a law of nature. And when you do that, they are far better off, and we're better off.
Welcome to Cleber Foundation in Timor-Leste, the Ryder-Cheshire home for the relief of suffering. My name is Joaquin Freitas Suarez, the Managing Director of Cleber Foundation. I can introduce more about the work of Cleber. Now we are going to St. Damian Respite Center, this building that we accommodate children with disability and people with amputation and some other patients like fractures. They come here for rehabilitations and treatment, and we can accommodate up to 12 patients in this building. This is a Barbara Cottage where we admitted ladies with psychosocial problem, and these are the 5 ladies that we provide mental health treatment for them, and we are very pleased that some of them completed the treatment and they recover from the mental health issue, and some already gone to their family, which is very good. Thank you. Mana sira dia kelai. Okay, Lazana. This is the Founders Park and the playground supported by Rotary. This is the Jack Bass, funded by Ryder-Cheshire of Australia, which we are using to transport patients from KD to National Hospital and back and forth for dialysis, for follow-up for other medical issues. Now we are passing the inpatient cottage, which include cottage 1 for dialysis patients, cottage 2 for TB patients, kitchen where we prepare food for all the patients and families, cottage 3 and 4 for general TB patients, and then 2 buildings for the MDR TB patients for intensive treatment. Welcome to the next bedroom. Here is Mana Lucia. Hi, Mana Lucia.
Hi.
She is our lab technician who is currently doing sample testing in the GeneXpert machine to detect TB cases. All the samples that we collected from active case finding in the remote villages, bringing here for the testing. So far we have detected many TB cases and then put on TB treatment. So this machine that will identify the TB cases. Thank you, Mana Lucia, for the good work. Obrigado. The physiotherapy room, where the patients with disability and fractures and amputation to come for rehabilitation in this building. The patients coming from the villages, mostly from Likisa and Hermera, and we bring them here to stay in St. Damian, and then they get physiotherapy. This is the clinic where the patients are coming to get the medications, and also this is the dental clinic. Welcome to Clivodomin Dental Clinic that we set up to provide dental service to the patients and the residents, and also provide the dental service for the community around Clivodomin Foundation. So this is the admin office where the human resources department and finance and support service working here to support all the programs implemented at Clivodomin. This is solar structure where we mount the solar panels on the top of the roof, and then inside the containers there are solar systems including batteries, inverters, where we can provide electricity to the compound. And as you can see underneath, we are using as car parking for KD cars. Thank you everyone for the opportunity to show you around through this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, thank you so much for all the support that you have given to KD for the relief of suffering in Timor-Leste.